Hello everyone. In this part of the presentation, let's see in detail about the final stage of tooth preparation. In the previous part, we have already finished the initial stage, that's the outline form and initial depth, primary resistance form, primary retention form and the convenience form. If you haven't seen the first part, kindly go back and watch the first part before watching this video. Now let's move on to the final stage. The first step in the final stage of tooth preparation is the removal of any remaining infective dentin or old restorative material. Let's see in detail about it. First, we have to understand what needs to be removed. We have already seen that there are some specific dimensions according to which we have to finish the initial stage of the tooth preparation. Even if there is a deep caries, we will not remove it during the initial stage of tooth preparation. We will prepare and remove the decay or deepen the cavity only to a specific depth, not more than that. So after finishing the initial stage of tooth preparation, we have to remove some things which are remaining. So there are three factors we have to take into consideration. One, there may be some enamel pits and fissure that may be remaining after finishing the initial tooth preparation, or there may be an infective dentin, or there may be a old restorative material. Let's see all these three one by one. First, let's see about enamel pits and fissures. In many cases, whenever there is a deep enamel pit or fissure, even after finishing the initial stage of the tooth preparation, we can see some spots of dark stains or enamel caries extending inside the dentin, which are actually the extensions of the enamel pits and fissures. And even if those pits and fissures are there, we need not have to deepen the entire cavity. What we can do is, if they are isolated, we can just remove those isolated spots. We can use a round burr or a spoon excavator and we can remove those isolated remains of the enamel pits and fissures. So that's the first consideration that we have to take. The second is the removal of the infected dentin. For students, understanding the infected dentin and its difference from the affected dentin is very, very important. Let's take a dental caries, and if you are looking below a decay or a cavity, there is something called as the infected dentin. It's called infected dentin because it is infected with microorganisms. It is full of bacteria. So whenever we are doing a tooth preparation, that infected dentin must be removed. If you are not removing the infected dentin, there will be occurrence of secondary caries. And below the infected dentin, there is something called as the affected dentin. Actually, the affected dentin may have some few bacteria, but they are not high in bacterial count as like that of the infected dentin. That means that the part of the dentin is affected by the chemicals or the acids which are created by the microorganisms, and there is not a complete collapse or complete loss of the organic and the inorganic structures. The organic structure will be intact, that the collagen fibers will be intact in affected dentin, but there will be remineralization. If you are removing up to the infected dentin and if you are leaving the affected dentin, this affected dentin will get remineralized. So while removing the caries, the decay and also the infected dentin must be removed and the affected dentin can be left. So clinically, while doing caries excavation, based on the color, the infected dentin can be variable in color, maybe brown, maybe yellowish, maybe black. And the affected dentin also can be variable in color, and clinically while excavating dental caries, it is not a very reliable procedure. And if you are looking at the hardness, the infected dentin is soft if you are removing with a spoon excavator, and the affected dentin is harder compared to that of infected dentin. So this is the most reliable technique while caries excavation. We should use a sharp spoon excavator and everything which is soft must be removed, and the harder part of the deep cavities need not have to be removed. And next is the staining with caries detector dyes. The infected dentin always gets stained, but the affected dentin may not get stained, but again, it is not a very reliable technique. The presence of microorganism in infected dentin is present, and in affected dentin it may be minimal or absent, but again clinically it is not possible to detect whether microorganisms are present in this infected dentin and or the affected dentin. So that is not clinically very reliable. So ideally, removal of the infected dentin should continue until the remaining dentin hardness approaches that of the normal dentin while we are excavating with a sharp spoon excavator. Some bacteria which may be present here and there in the affected dentin and maybe in the deeper layers will be deprived of the nutrition, and it will be destroyed by the defense mechanisms of the pulp and the dentin. So need not have to worry about that, and we can go for a permanent restoration. The third factor that has to be considered is the presence or absence of the old restorative material. In many cases, the old restorative material need not have to be removed completely, but we have to remove the old restorative material if it is going to affect the aesthetic result of the new restoration. Maybe while doing a composite restoration in the anterior region, we may have to remove the old restorative material because it can affect the aesthetic result of the new restoration. So that once we have to remove the old restoration, then we can restore the defect with the new restorative material that will be aesthetically pleasing. And next, if the old restorative material may compromise the amount of the needed retention. In this picture, we can see that there is a old restoration. Let's think that the old restoration that we have placed is a dental amalgam with a zinc phosphate base, and while replacing, if you are planning to replace it with an composite restoration, what happens is the zinc phosphate, which is a base for the dental amalgam, will be retained in the floor. That can compromise the bonding of composite to the tooth. So, in order to provide a better retention, we may have to remove the old restorative material so that the bond strength of the new restoration that we are placing will be better. And the third reason when we have to remove a old restorative material is whenever we are taking a radiograph, and if there is some evidence of secondary caries below the old restorative material, then we have to remove the old restorative material completely. Then we have to remove the secondary caries. Then we have to restore with a new restorative material. So the old restorative material with a secondary caries, the restoration must be replaced. The next, whenever we find the tooth was asymptomatic preoperatively, there may be a deep restoration, and the patient may have some symptoms in the tooth, maybe some lingering pain or night pain. In those situations, we may have to go for replacing the old restoration, and if needed, endodontic therapy may be needed because the pulp is symptomatic. And the other indication when to replace the old restorative material is whenever we find the periphery of the remaining old restorative material is not intact. We all know that the margins of the restorations are the area which is prone for more incidence of secondary caries, micro leakage, staining, and all those problems. So whenever we find the margin of the restoration is deteriorated, in those situations we have to remove and replace the restoration completely. Okay, so now in the second part of this step, we have to understand how are we going to excavate the dental caries. We can use a high speed handpiece or high speed of tooth removal, then slow speed, and also a spoon excavator. Let's see in what all places which all type of tooth removal is indicated. Let's consider that this is a dental caries, and whenever there is a caries which is excessive in the enamel portion and also the outer part of the dentin, we have to use a high speed handpiece and maybe in an aerator. And once with an aerator, preferably we can use a diamond point to remove decay from the enamel and maybe a tungsten carbide bar to remove the decay from dentin. Once that is removed, then the deeper portion of the decay in the dentin must be removed with a slow speed handpiece. That's a micromotor hand speed at a speed of around 25,000 rpm. In a tungsten carbide bar, we have to remove. But the caries which are present very close to the pulp, well, if you are using a rotary instruments, that will have a very poor tactile sensation. So we must remove it with a spoon excavator. So the removal of the caries from the outer from the enamel and the outer dentinal caries must be removed with a high-speed handpiece. The infected dentin and the caries in the inner dentin must be removed with a slow-speed handpiece, and the caries which is present close to the pulp must be removed with a hand instrument like a spoon excavator. Pulpal damage from the iatrogenic error can happen if you are careless while doing caries excavation. The creation of the frictional heat while using the burr and the pulp may become infected by forcing microorganisms into the dentinal tubules through excessive pressure with a spoon excavator, because already we have seen that the caries which is very close to the pulp must be removed with a spoon excavator, so that the dentin thickness will be very less. So if you are forcing the spoon excavator, the bacteria may be forced to go into the dental pulp, that we may damage the dental pulp. And one more way that the dental pulp may get damaged is the usage of the sharp explorer or probe to check the consistency of the deeper areas in the prepared cavity. So this the sharp instruments can easily make a small pathway or punch in the deeper dentin and it may expose the dental pulp. So the usage of the sharp probe or explorer in deep dentinal caries or after caries excavation have to be very careful. So we have seen about the removal of any infected dentin or the old restorative material. Now let's see about the next step, that is the second step in the final stage of tooth preparation, which is the pulp protection when indicated. Okay, so in this we can split this step into two. The first one, why we have to protect the dental pulp, and the second, how are we going to protect the dental pulp. If you are looking into the reason why we have to protect the dental pulp, we know that dental pulp is a soft tissue which is present inside the enamel and dentin. So being a soft tissue, and it is a very tissue that is very easily which can undergo damage from so many insults which can happen. So those insults are the heat which is generated by the rotary instruments, some ingredients of the restorative materials, the thermal changes which are conducted through the restorative materials, and then forces transmitted through the restorative materials to the dentin in the long-term usage of the restoration, the galvanic shock, and the ingress of the noxious products and chemicals and bacteria through micro leakage. So these are the reasons, these are the so many irritations which can cause to the dental pulp. So we have to protect, and let's see one by one about all these insults which can happen to the dental pulp. First is the heat generated by the rotary instruments. While using the aerator, we may use the water coolant. It may provide some form of protection and the heat generated may be very less. Still, if there is insufficient flow of water coolant, or if you are using a micromotor handpiece which don't have a water coolant, in those situations the heat may cause damage to the dental pulp. Certain ingredients from the restorative materials, for example phosphoric acid from zinc phosphate cement, polyacrylic acid from glass ionomer cement, mercury from dental amalgam, all can cause some form of problem or irritations to the dental pulp. The thermal changes conducted through the restorations, like for example the metallic restorations like direct filling gold, for dental amalgam cast metal restorations, and all these, whenever the patient is eating something cold or hot, the heat or the temperature difference can be transmitted to the dental pulp through these metallic restorations. Next, the forces which are transmitted through the restoration. Whenever the patient is biting or chewing on something, there can be excessive force. So this force may get transmitted to the dental pulp, thus causing some damage to the dental pulp. Next comes the galvanic shock. Galvanic shock happens when there are some dissimilar metals. For example, a gold restoration and an amalgam restoration comes in contact with each other while biting or chewing. There can be a flow of electrons from one restoration to the other. So this flow of electron is an electric current, and this can be felt by the patient as a sharp shooting pain. So when this happens, the patient may get the severe pain for a second or two. So in order to avoid that, we have to be very careful in protecting the dental pulp. And the next and the final one is the micro leakage. The micro leakage is the gap which is formed between the tooth and the restoration, can allow the conduction of the liquids or the bacteria from the oral cavity to the deeper portions. So once this happens, there is ingress of bacteria and the fluids causing sensitivity. This is one of the most common reason for sensitivity after doing a composite restoration. So we have seen about the different insults which could happen to the dental pulp. So in the second part, we have to learn about how are we going to protect the dental pulp from all these insults. So in order to protect, we have the following ways. One is the application of the bases, liners, varnishes, sealers and dentin adhesives. Let's see one by one. Base, which is a thick layer which is applied in the floor of the tooth preparation, maybe around 0.5 to 0.75 millimeters. So on top of this base, we can apply or we can do the restoration. It provides thermal insulation, electrical insulation and mechanical protection. Base is very commonly indicated, and we can use a base like a zinc phosphate and zinc polycarboxylate. Preferably we can use this under dental amalgam. Zinc oxide eugenol we can use, which is a low strength base. Then we can use glass ionomer cement and resin modified glass ionomer cement, both of which can act as a good base under composite restoration. Next come the liners. The liners are thin layers which are applied on the bottom, and on top of that we have to apply a base, and then we can do a restoration. So we have to be very careful that a liner should not be applied on the walls of the tooth preparation or the areas where the liner comes in contact with the oral cavity. So the liner will reduce the dentin permeability, and it acts as an antibacterial agent, and it has many of the liner will have a fluoride releasing agents like a glass ionomer cement. The other liner which is commonly used is calcium hydroxide. So then comes the varnishes. Varnishes are applied throughout the cavity preparation, that's the walls and the floors, and after that we can do the restoration. So varnishes are exclusively applied for dental amalgam because it seals the dentinal tubules, and it can prevent the discoloration of the tooth caused by mercury in long term. And the application of the varnish will also enhance the initial marginal seal of dental amalgam. Copal resin is a very commonly used varnish. Next come the sealers. The sealers are again applied on the walls and the floor of the tooth preparation. After that we can do a restoration. So they act as a desensitizing agent and like an antibacterial agent. They can be glutaraldehyde, hydroxyethyl methacrylate HEMA, and benzalkonium chloride and chlorhexidine. So they are applied as thin layers. Again, the sealers are applied for non-bonded restorations like dental amalgam. Sealers are not applied for bonded restorations because for a bonded restoration like a composite, we can apply a dentine adhesive. So we can apply a dentine adhesive and then we shall do the restoration. So that also does the job of sealing the dentinal tubules, and it also provides a good bonding of the restoration with that of the tooth. So all adhesives which are used for bonding composite restorations are all dentine adhesives and we can use. So thus we have come to the end of the pulp protection. We have we saw about the reason that the damage that could happen to the dental pulp and what are the ways or the techniques how we can protect the dental pulp. The next step in the tooth preparation is the secondary resistance and retention form. We have already seen about the primary resistance and retention form in the initial stage of the tooth preparation. In the final stage, we have already protected the pulp by applying a dental base or some alternative material, and then we have removed the deep decay like the affected dentine or maybe the infected dentine. So because of all these things, now the retention which was provided by the primary retention and maybe also the resistance form may be compromised. So in order to enhance that, we have to do a secondary resistance and retention form. So basically we can provide this by enhancing the mechanical preparation features, and also we can use some chemical applications like etching, priming and adhesions to enhance. So basically we can see these three groups of techniques can be used for enhancing the secondary resistance and retention. They are the retention grooves and cores, the preparation extensions, then the skirt preparations for cast metal restorations, beveled enamel margins, then pins, slots, steps and amalgam pins, and finally the placement of etchant, primer and adhesive on the prepared walls of the tooth preparation. Let's see one by one. First, let's see about the retention grooves and the cores. The vertically oriented retention grooves will act as an additional retention in the proximal portions of the tooth preparation. Similarly, for class 3 and class 5 preparations for dental amalgam, we can place horizontally oriented retention grooves. Retention cores are placed in for class 3 dental amalgams in the incisal area, and for class 1 or class 2 in the dentine in the pulpal floor. We can see that the vertically oriented grooves can be placed only close to the axial wall, or it can be extended till the occlusal extension. So this is normally placed for all cast metal restorations, and even we can place it for dental amalgam restorations. The second is the preparation extension. So the preparation extensions are the extending the tooth preparations buccally or lingually into the buccal or the lingual developmental grooves, and if they are carious. So we can see that these preparations are extended palatally and also buccally in these situations, the maxillary and the mandibular molars. So this groove extensions extending to the surface will enhance the retention and the resistance features. And the next is the skirts preparation. The skirt preparations are given in cast gold or cast metal restorations. So that will provide an embracing effect to the tooth and increases the resistance form. Let's see in this picture that the preparation can be extended towards this aspect. We can see here that there is a cusp which is missing, and in the opposite side we can extend coming beyond the axial line angle. So here is the axial line angle. So extending beyond that. So what happens is like a arm which is coming from both sides, this restoration will come around from both sides and it will grasp or it will embrace the tooth. So this will enhance the resistance form and it will also enhance the retention form. So this is called the skirt preparation. Next, the beveled enamel margin. So the marginal bevel can be given for two types of restoration. One is the cast metal restoration and second is for the amalgam, the next is for the composite restorations. For amalgam restorations, we should not place an enamel bevel. So here we can see that the bevels are placed in the margins, like in the cavo surface margins we can place the bevels. So if we are placing the bevels in this areas for a composite restoration, it will enhance the surface of enamel which is available for bonding. And for a cast metal restoration, in the same way, it will enhance the resistance and retention. We shall see more about the beveled enamel margins in the next step. And next is the placement of the pins, slots, steps and the amalgam pins. Pins are placed for almost all restoration which can be placed even for a composite restoration, but amalgam pins are specifically made for only for complex amalgam restorations. These slots and steps can be placed in the pulpal floor or the gingival seat in order to enhance the retention. Amalgam pins are placed whenever there is a missing cusp. So while doing a complex amalgam restoration, so that will enhance the retention feature for the restoration. And finally, the placement of the etchant, primer and the adhesive and the prepared wall while doing a bonded restoration. We can also expect an enhanced retention, like there is something called as a bonded amalgam restoration. So in which we place a self-cure bonding agent and a self-curing resin, and on top of that, before the resin sets, we have to pack dental amalgam inside that, so that the amalgam get entangled within the restorative material and it will provide an enhanced retention. For a composite, if you are preparing the walls which are fairly rough and if you are placing etching, bonding and an adhesive, that will enhance the retention of the composite restoration. The retention of the indirect restorations like a bonded ceramic restoration or a cast metal restoration or an indirect composite restoration, the bonding will enhance the retention of the luting cement. So bonding plays a very important role in providing a secondary retention feature. So that we have come to the end of the secondary resistance and retention form. Now we shall proceed with the procedures for finishing the external walls. So this external walls, or we can simply say that the part of the preparation where the cavo surface margins are present. So cavo surface margin is the junction between the prepared and the unprepared tooth surface. So the wall which is present between the inner walls and the floors of the tooth preparation and the outer surface of the tooth, which is called as the external walls. So this external wall and the marginal configurations are very important depending upon the type of the restorative material which we are using. So the objectives of the finishing the external walls are create an optimal marginal junction between the restorative material and the tooth structure, and also to afford a smooth marginal junction, and also to provide a maximal strength of the tooth and the restorative material at and near the margin of the restoration. A point which must be taken into consideration at this stage is whenever there is a restoration which is extending subgingivally, or that is to the root surface, the joint, the marginal configuration must be a 90-degree joint or a butt joint, except for intracoronal, that is cast metal restorations. For a cast metal restoration, we can place a bevel. For an amalgam, for a composite, and for a ceramic restoration, we must prepare a 90-degree butt joint in the subgingival or close to the root surface. The factors that have to be taken into consideration while finishing the external walls are the direction of the enamel rods, the support of the enamel rods at the dentine-enamel junction and laterally, the type of the restorative material which we are planning to place, and the location of the margin of the restoration, and that is the preparation, and the degree of smoothness or the roughness which is desired. Let's see everything one by one. The direction of the enamel rods. It is very important that we have to understand the direction of the enamel rods. So the enamel rod directions are not the same. So it will, if you are looking into the proximal surface, it will face towards the occlusal surface in the occlusal third, and in the middle third it will face almost horizontally, and towards the apical part the enamel rods will face towards the gingiva. So whenever we are, if we are not removing the unsupported enamel rods completely, after doing the restoration, in the long term, in the due course, this unsupported enamel will get disrupted and it will fracture off, leaving a marginal deterioration. So that has to be avoided. So we should use instruments in order to remove this unsupported enamel rods. And there should not be any sharp line angles. Whenever there are some sharp line angles, it indirectly tells that there is an excessive or an unsupported enamel which is present. So we should never leave any area sharp in the tooth preparation. There are two important considerations that we have to make at this stage. One is the design of the cavus surface angle and the degree of the smoothness or the roughness of the wall. The design of the cavus surface angle depends upon the type of the restorative material which we are using. For example, dental amalgam and ceramic have a poor edge strength in thin sections. So the cavus surface margin must be a 90-degree butt joint. And for a cast metal restorations, we can give a beveled enamel margins. So the beveling the enamel margins for a cast metal restoration have many advantages. First, it provides a strong enamel margin, and even if there is a small undersized casting, then the marginal seal will be provided by the bevels, and if there is a marginal metal which is thin, it can be easily burnished and adapted. By placing a bevel, we get the marginal metal which is very thin, which can be easily burnished, and it also assists in the adaptation of the gingival margins of the casting that fail to seat by a slight amount. So that will prevent the marginal leakage. For an amalgam, beveling is contraindicated except in the gingival floor. And for amalgam, although we do not call it as a bevel, a slight beveling of around 15 to 20 degrees may be done. So let's see in this picture, we can see that the enamel rods in this area, we can see that there are some unsupported enamel rods. So we can see in this picture clearly that there is some unsupported enamel rods. So if these enamel rods are not removed, what happens is, in due course, this enamel rods in this area will get ditched off and there will be a defect over there. So if we are removing around 15 to 20 degrees with the help of a gingival marginal trimmer, we will remove this unsupported enamel rods, thus providing or creating a butt joint which will be very strong. So that will enhance the resistance form of the dental amalgam restoration that we are doing. For if you are looking into the composite restoration, the beveling has so many advantages. Beveling placed in the enamel has so many advantages. Increasing the surface area of the enamel which is available for etching and bonding is enhanced. So the adjacent and the minor defects can be included with the bevel, and there is no need for extending the entire tooth preparation. So then the aesthetic quality of the restoration is enhanced because of a smooth transition between the tooth and the restoration, and the marginal seal may be enhanced because we are placing the margins in the enamel with etching and bonding. So we all know that composite bonds better to enamel. So then the last point, how are we are going to provide a smooth surface. The high speed handpiece we are using exclusively nowadays because that is very fast in doing the tooth preparation, but at the same time there is a less tactile sensation which leads to a rapid tooth removal without having any control from the operator. This can lead to some overextension of the margins, grooves which can happen in the walls, and the rounded cavo surface angles, especially on the proximal margin. So in order to prevent this, the marginal configurations can be prepared with the help of a hand instruments. These hand instruments can provide the smooth enamel walls. Hand instruments like enamel hatchets and marginal trimmers may be used to plane the enamel walls, cleave the enamel, and for establishing the enamel bevels. So we can summarize it by saying that inlay or onlay preparation, especially for a cast metal restoration, a smooth surface is very, very essential, so that there will be a close adaptation. So the walls and the margins should be very, very smooth for a cast metal restoration. For a composite restoration, it has to be rough. Especially we can create a rough margins and the walls by using a rough diamond point or a coarse diamond point, so which will enhance the surface area which is available for bonding. So there will be a better bonding and a better retention. And for an amalgam, a smooth preparation wall is not mandatory, but if you are providing a smooth walls, it is not a mistake, but a rougher prepared wall can enhance the marginal seal. So thus we have seen about the procedures for finishing the external wall. The last step in the steps in tooth preparation is the final procedures of cleaning, inspecting, and desensitizing. So we have already finished the tooth preparation. So finally we have to give a look how clean the tooth is, the preparation is, and we have to inspect whether there may be any secondary caries or any caries which is not removed is left, and then we have to desensitize or bond the tooth preparation. Let's see about that. For cleaning is to free the preparation of the debris. There may be some smear layers which are present, or there may be some loosened tooth structure, or maybe some bits of enamel, or maybe there's maybe some blood stains. So all these things have to be cleaned. For that we can do with a water from a 3-way syringe, and we have to dry with a cotton pellet. If you are using the air from a 3-way syringe, it can cause the damage to the odontoblast process which are present close to the dental pulp, that is inside the dentinal tubule. So the air from 3-way syringe should never be used for drying the tooth preparation. And next we can clean and disinfect that preparation with chlorhexidine 2% solutions. So even if there are some residual bacteria or some contaminants while doing the tooth preparation has happened, that can be disinfected. Then finally desensitization. Desensitizers are applied only for non-bonded restoration like a dental amalgam. For a bonded restoration, dentin bonding agents are applied and to limit the post-operative sensitivity. For amalgam, we can desensitize with 5% glutaraldehyde and 35% hydroxyethyl methacrylate. The gluma can be used for desensitizing the dentin. So Thus, we have come to the end of the final stage of the tooth preparation. We have seen about the initial and the final stages and all the steps which are present inside the initial and the final stage of the tooth preparations. So I hope this video and this presentation is helpful for you. So stay tuned, and I will upload more videos which will be helpful for the dental students. Thanks. And if you like this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel Smart Dentistry Students Zone. Thank you.